Hello, and welcome to The Resource, the podcast propelling employer brands to recruit smarter and retain better. I'm your host, Priscilla Peters.
And I'm your other host, Scott Dismuke. And Priscilla, you and I are both coming off a little vacation time.
Yeah, little summer vacay. I went first, and then you decided to go when we did our Q2 data rundown webinar, which we'll talk about that here in a minute. But how was your vacay?
It was fantastic. Weather was great.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time on the beach and spent a lot of time actually not worrying about work for a change. It was kind of nice to have a few days to kind of unplug.
Nice. We had a good time too. It's always nice to just take some time, get away with the fam, all that fun stuff. I saw your pictures. It looked like y'all had a great time. So
yeah, we did. It was
very
a lot of fun.
Exciting. Okay, so we are, T-minus less than a month away from football season, our favorite time of year, which I don't know, basketball season may be our favorite time of year now.
It is, probably, at least for us, for right now. But I think 3 weeks from this upcoming Thursday. So we're filming this, recording this on the 5th of August. So I think right there at the end of August, we've got an early Labor Day this year. And I was actually talking to some of the guys here in the office. We were talking about football season. And if you look at that Labor Day weekend, starting with that Thursday through Labor Day, there's a ton of football on. So,
dude, I didn't realize Texas was playing Ohio State that first weekend, and they're ranked 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Coming out of the preseason poll. So that's going to be quite the game.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I get back from summer vacation, it's like I am so ready for it to say, okay, it can get cold now. Let's have football on Saturdays and Sundays. So, yeah, the minute I got back from vacation, I was ready for fall.
Yeah, very exciting. And you and I are attending a game together this year.
We are. The wife and I are going to make the 7-hour drive over to Fayetteville. And not only are we attending the game, but the four of us have an Airbnb.
Yes, so more to come on that.
Yeah,
more to come.
We could have a very interesting podcast episode come October. All kinds of fun stories to tell. But yeah, we're going to the Arkansas Notre Dame game at the end of September. I don't have a lot of high hopes for that game.
No,
I'm not expecting a hog victory, but it'll at least be fun to go and watch the Irish play in Razorback Stadium. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. At some point we're going to play them at home, and I really want to go when we play them as well. We were supposed to, I don't know what the deal is, but we were supposed to play them first.
Yeah, I think, was it COVID related? Did something happen?
COVID.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
COVID screwed everything up.
I know, right? So we're very excited about football season. So this episode, we are going to be going through our Q2 data rundown. So all the data that we've kind of curated, if you will, from a recruiting and retention standpoint. PDA, you guys bring to the table all of the data that you have from the quarter. You aren't actually on this particular webinar, so you won't be part of the audio, but you guys did share a lot of the data that we're going to dive into. So listen, there's lots of good stuff in this. Like you guys had several takeaways that I think are going to be good for this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I think the only thing I would say, since I put all of the responsibility on you on this one, since I was sitting on a beach, is I think the big thing that stood out to me was the rise in general maintenance issues. We always talk about equipment. We always talk about compensation. Obviously, those are still pretty prevalent in the Q2 data. But what I would say is we know that companies are extending their trade-in cycles given the uncertainty of the market. We have seen an uptick in equipment issues, but the biggest thing we've seen is an uptick in general maintenance issues and drivers complaining about that. And what I would say about that is the general maintenance plays such an important role in driver retention. And it really plays an important role now. And if you're one of those companies that's extending your trade-in cycles, know that your trucks are getting older. They tend to break down more when they get older. And what we have seen is a rise in drivers talking about mileage compensation issues as a result of recurring and multiple breakdowns. And so I wanted to point that out. You may have said that in the webinar. If you did, I'm just kind of repeating that. But that is one thing that we've really seen. But I do appreciate you filling in for me. I'm sure it was fantastic, but I do appreciate you filling in for me. I will do my best not to do that again. But if we schedule it during my vacation, I guess I can't make too many promises.
Yes, no worries at all. Hopefully I covered it all. And as always, if any of our listeners or viewers have any questions, they can shoot us an email. Our email addresses will be in the show notes. So let's just kind of get to it. Lots of great data, lots of great information. Hopefully you can take back to your recruiting and retention teams. So here is our Q2 2025 data rundown. So we've got our quarterly data rundown that we're going to go through today. We've got 4 sets of data we'll be covering: economic and industry data, advertising and marketing data, driver retention data, and then we've got some regular driver data, information on the driver market that we wanted to share. First of all, we have our economic and industry data. So I'm just going to kind of dive right in here. One of the questions that a lot of folks are asking is, has the freight rebound arrived? I would venture to say some of you on this call maybe would say yes, and then some of you would say absolutely not. We are not necessarily feeling it yet. I think there's certain sectors that are, some are not. I know, I guess a few weeks ago, or maybe like a month and a half or so ago, there was a pretty large industry media outlet that said, okay, freight recession's over, and we all got kind of excited. Again, some of you are feeling that, some are not. But we recently did a carrier survey last month. We asked carriers, what is your expectation for growth? Are you expecting to grow? And 67% said, yes, we are expecting to grow in the next 12 months in some form or fashion. 20% said significantly. 47% said slightly. So I think that's promising. We'll take that, right? So many of you on this webinar today that are carriers, maybe indeed you are looking at possibly growing over the next 12 months. Also, we have seen competition for drivers begin to intensify. We started seeing this honestly several months ago, where driver jobs started increasing. But what's ending up happening is, as the number of job postings grows, the number of job seekers is declining. Now, that I do not want you to get this confused with the fact that we're saying there are not drivers looking for a job. In fact, we are seeing where turnover has been beginning to rise. And so what we're saying here is that as the number of jobs are increasing, the number of job seekers per job is declining, because as the competition increases, there are more jobs, right? Then there's less eyeballs on the individual jobs. Now, the highest percentage of drivers that we've asked in the driver survey said that they were looking for a job in the spring. So that was 46.8%. So again, I don't want you to confuse declining number of job seekers per job for a declining number of overall truck driver job seekers. That is not true. Matter of fact, more drivers than have ever told us that they're looking for a job are. It's just that because there's more jobs, there's less job seekers per job. Okay. So hopefully that kind of understand where I'm coming from there. Here's another data set on the carrier survey. And I did have a question in the chat, how many carriers responded? I think I'll have to go back and look to be sure. And you can download this. We just released it, our carrier surveys. You can check out our social channels. But I believe it was around 119, if I remember right. But that number is on the very first page of the carrier survey. So you can grab that there. One of the other things that we asked carriers was, do you anticipate raising driver pay in the near future? There's a lot of people that are starting to begin to talk about that. I know for those of us who have been in the industry for a while, we're sitting there going, what is happening? We had so many driver pay raises, post COVID, in that window of just the crazy freight boom that we had. And driver pay increases. I feel like every time we turned around, we had a different carrier saying, hey, I raised my pay, I raised my pay. And so I think that's very, interesting to look at. 29% of carriers plan on raising pay in the near future. Now, that's 29%, but I feel like a lot of folks are kind of looking at that and thinking about that. Speaking of driver pay, how we are paying drivers has evolved. This is some data that came out of our fleet intel data community. This is really interesting when you look at from 2022 to 2025, how it has evolved, how we're paying drivers. So traditionally, most fleets, and still today, a lot of fleets are still on this cents per mile pay model, but we're beginning to see more and more fleets look at, do I want to have some sort of guaranteed pay model? Do I want to have some sort of percentage pay model, which is something that I've seen really grow? Some carriers are translating their pay to an hourly type of conversation, especially in the recruiting part of, as they're recruiting new drivers, especially younger drivers who might not really understand the cents per mile model. So there's a lot of things going on from a driver pay standpoint. So this is something that you're definitely going to want to keep your eyeballs on, want to make sure that you're up to date and just like how you're comparing, how you're advertising your pay. There's lots of pay transparency laws in place now. Lots of things related to driver pay and how it's evolving. But this we thought was super interesting. And these are in driver jobs, how folks are advertising their pay and paying their drivers. So this was really, really interesting, something that I know we thought you guys would be interested in. Also, we've really kind of seen this surge in home time demand. So it's happened. It's happened. We saw it come up on the driver survey in the spring, and then we also saw it on the carrier survey. So 57% of carriers said most of our drivers are leaving for better home time. Now, when we ask the drivers who are looking for a new job, why are you looking? Many of them said home time. What is interesting, though, is when you look at the data that comes out of PDA and the retention data on why exactly did a driver leave their position voluntarily in Q2 specifically, we're going to go over those numbers in a minute. A lot of them aren't necessarily saying it's definitely because of home time. It's definitely because of home time. But what's ending up happening is a lot of the factors that impact home time are reasons for why drivers are leaving. So, for example, poor scheduling, or what drivers refer to as poor scheduling and poor planning. That might end up impacting their home time, right? So that's something that has come up. But Fleet said, listen, we're having to get really creative with, number one, how we're looking at our operations, because how do I fulfill the expectation that my drivers have on when they want to get home? And then really, how are we communicating that? I heard somebody say the other day, like, home time could just really refer to me getting home on time. So in other words, if I need to get home, if I'm a driver and I need to get home for a specific reason, am I getting home on time for that reason? To see, Johnny play in a football game on Friday night or whatever that might be. And so there's a lot of different things that impact home time, but it is kind of really becoming a central topic when it comes to drivers and retention and how we communicate home time in the recruiting process. Another thing that's gotten a lot of attention lately and just a lot of conversations that we're having with a lot of carriers is this whole idea of the intent of the drivers applying. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in some of the data we have in a different section. But on our carrier survey, a lot of carriers said that the lack of qualified applicants, meaning like applicants that have the years experience that you want them to have, or they meet the specific hiring criteria that you have, that it is difficult to find those higher quality type of drivers today. Many of you, really kind of upped your game when it came to hiring standards post-COVID, because as the freight recession began to happen, we could be a lot more selective on the drivers that we hired. And so there's lots of conversations going on about, okay, Is it time to revisit our hiring criteria? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Another thing that's really challenging is the ease of apply. So, how easy it is for drivers to apply is really becoming a challenge because it requires a lot of times no genuine interest or intent from the driver. And so, we're going to talk about how you can, some just strategy behind that, and how you can look at improving, understanding intent signals from drivers and that type of thing here in just a minute. Also, I thought this was really interesting. This came out of some data that we looked at with Indeed. And what they are seeing and what we're seeing often is that there are 2 times more job seekers for local driving jobs than there are for the traditional regional or OTR driving jobs. So, what that means is that, when I talked about job seekers per job earlier, that number is higher for local jobs because there are more job seekers that are interested. And you might say, oh, well, I outpay local jobs. You probably do, but they're becoming more and more competitive from a pay standpoint, and they're home either every night or very often, and it's just a difficult job to compete with from a local standpoint. Now, if you hire local drivers, then this is great for you, right? But it's something to look at for those of us who are hiring regional and OTR driving jobs, to really look and do a competitive analysis of how am I stacking up against those local jobs. I talked to a carrier a couple weeks ago who said, yes, our turnover is creeping up, but really the main sector where I'm losing drivers is to local jobs. So you may be in that same category, and this is just some data that supports that. So that's our industry and marketing data. I'm sorry, industry and economic data. Now I'm going to dive into the advertising and marketing data. We do have some exclusive benchmarking data that we release to our conversion clients every quarter. And if you're a conversion client and you would like the full benchmarking data, please reach out to your account executive. That's things like cost per hire, cost per lead, leads per hire, by carrier type, van, flatbed, reefer, all that fun stuff. We also do a cost per full app. I will tell you, most of this data stayed about the same from quarter over quarter from Q1 to Q2. Actually, cost per full app for our clients did decline in Q2. So that was good, but we just like to kind of keep a benchmark on that. And if you're a conversion client, you have access to all of that data. But when we look at our overall best performing Q2 strategies, and we look at touch points and hires, in other words, what sources touched these drivers as they were going through the recruiting funnel, and out of those, which ones performed the best? So SEM Interactive, SEM Aware, this is our search engine marketing, and also social media advertising. We're going to talk about a little bit more like data around some of these things here in just a second. But I think it's also important to call out the number one tool that touched more hires than any other was our Lead Assist virtual recruiter tool. And so this uses advanced AI automation to take the short form, nurture that lead, get you to a qualified application, full app, while your recruiters are focusing on closing the ones that you already, those full apps that you already have. So it's basically the technology working kind of in the background for you. When that tool touches a lead, it tends to convert very faster and at a higher volume than those who do not. So let's talk about this whole idea of how do we drive more qualified leads? So like I said, we're having this conversation on, I'm getting drivers, they don't have enough experience. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they filled out a short form, but they really didn't have any intention of looking for, actually aggressively looking for a new job. Maybe they apply and then they just ghost you, right? That might be something that you run into. So here's some kind of strategy for you to look at in improving that. So clearly state what your requirements are in the job description. If you require 2 years of experience, make sure your job description is really outlining exactly and clearly what your requirements are. Having a healthy cost per job when you're reaching quality drivers. When you're looking at the search engine marketing interactive, SEM interactive, and specifically when you're looking at platforms like Indeed or ZipRecruiter, it's really important to make sure you have a healthy cost per job. So talk to your account executive about that if you're a conversion client. If you're not, really look at when you're on those platforms, what is the cost per job and am I reaching the quality drivers that I need to? Also, look at refining your short form to look at incorporating some intent signals there. Are you interested in making a switch today? There's certain things you can ask that can create some intent signals for you. Do some market research. Make sure that your pay is really in line with what drivers are getting paid in that market. I can't tell you how many times we will have a carrier say, I'm losing I get these leads and I'm not winning and I don't know why am I not converting these to hires? And often we go in and look and it's like, well, if you looked at your pay and adjusted it just a little, when you look at what you're competing against, it's pretty significant. So sometimes tweaks like that can matter even on a regional basis or by zip code even. There's lots of different ways to look at it. And then make sure you're using the tech. Make sure you're using the AI that exists today to help you screen unqualified drivers and get you to the qualified drivers that you need. So those are some things to think about when you're looking at improving your quality and really being able to focus on the drivers that are qualified to go to work for your carrier. Here is a tool that we have today called CallWorks Conversation Analytics. And when we introduced it a couple of months ago, we have got a lot of carriers that are on it today. And so we've just had more and more data kind of coming out of that. The target call score. So when we first went in, we didn't really know like what's a good score. We assumed 100% was like the best score. But when you look at how the AI is scoring all of these calls, there's so many different things that come into play. And what we've realized is when recruiters score around 75 or higher, that's a good targeted score for these calls. Some of the common opportunities for improvements, and these are just things you can talk to your recruiters about, is some of these you would think would be kind of what I would call Captain Obvious, but this is where recruiters are scoring the lowest. Asking the caller what their name is. What is your name, driver? Acquiring their contact information. So maybe they get the name, but they don't get their phone number or their email. Really having a lack of clarity and structure in the actual call. So the AI can identify, listen, Susie was on this call with Joe, but Joe didn't know where she was going. The conversation was not structured. There was not clarity in what she was delivering. So now CallWorks Conversation Analytics provides a recruiter criteria report by individual recruiter. And so it's just a great tool. But if you're on that, a good score to target for your recruiters is 75. Also, we've got some trends in social media that we wanted to share with you. So there's some things going down on Meta. Okay, so a couple of things that we wanted to share with you. Number one is Facebook Reels took the number one spot for driver lead volume on Meta. It had previously been the news feed. So Reels had been kind of creeping up in getting more and more leads, and it finally in Q2 surpassed the news feed. So think of that as I'm on Facebook, I'm scrolling through my news feed, I see ads, and I also see Reels, so the little vertical videos that you see that have some sort of CTA, some sort of call to action. Those are outperforming newsfeed ads now. Now, good news is your strategists are very well, aware of this. The bad news is you might not have any video content or video assets to give them. So let us help you with that. We can help you create video assets. We have all sorts of packages to do that. And we can even come out and do a video shoot and just create lots and lots of them all at once. You can create those with a phone. So this does not have to be high production content. Okay. But they are producing leads at a higher volume than the news feed now, which is a big deal. Also, we had a growth in comments and messages from drivers on social ads. So In Q2, drivers left over 17,289 comments in Q2, and our ads produced over 6,000 direct messages on Facebook. So they see an ad and then they're like, oh, I have a question. And then Lead Assist takes over and starts, converting that lead. And so again, it's just let the technology work for you, right? Also, this is new. Meta is now offering notification ad placements. So when you get a notification from Meta, you're going to start seeing ads in that. And because of that, we can put your recruitment ads in there as well. So that's something new that Meta has come out with. So keep your eye out for that in your strategy. We're going to be doing some testing on it and just seeing how it works from a recruiting standpoint. Also, here's just a quick case study on how what we call rich creative forms on Meta are really improving conversion rates. And when we say rich creative, what we mean is integrating dynamic content like images, videos, custom fields within the actual Meta form. And when you include some of those dynamic visual types of things, then what we're seeing is the conversion rate improves. And so that's something for you to consider. Talk to your account executive about. I know your digital strategists are definitely looking at that as an option for you. And then lastly, just want to share some industry insights when it comes to social media. So average daily time in the US for users on social media are 2 hours and 21 minutes. That's on average. You probably know where you fall in that, but drivers are the same as us, right? Maybe even more. I would dare say for drivers, it may be higher. That is just users in the United States. 83% of adult social media users claim to use it to research brands and products, and 79% of job seekers use it in their job search. We know the number one place drivers are going is online driver reviews. So we know they've told us that. They say 74% of them said, I'm going to online driver reviews first. So keep that in mind. Make sure your reviews are where they need to be and all the things. We can certainly help with that as well. Next, we have our driver retention data, and this is from our friends at People Data Analytics, PDA. Normally, Scott Dismuke is here to share this information, but he is out this week, so you guys are stuck with me even on the retention front. So over 60,000 phone calls with drivers is where this data comes from, and these drivers are typically in their first 180 days. So when we look at the data that came from PDA in Q2, this shows us the top, what we call core issues or concerns. So drivers that are having issues, having concerns, some of them are deciding to voluntarily terminate their employment. Some of them are not. They're working through whatever the issue is, but these are how the issues fell. And I think it's important to point out here that equipment rose above compensation. We're kind of seeing equipment start to really kind of rear its ugly head, if you will. A lot of folks are holding on to equipment longer than they normally would because the cost of those assets. And so it's really starting to become a retention issue for many carriers. I don't know if it is at your carrier or not, but it's something definitely to look at. You might be saying, well, Priscilla, home time only says 4%. That is really because what I had said earlier, a lot of these things are related to home time. We're going to drill into some of them. So a lot of these operations issues can impact home time. Equipment issues can certainly impact home time. So there are a lot of these that actually do impact home time in some form or fashion. Here are the top 10 root causes for drivers who did decide to leave. So drivers who said, I'm out, I'm voluntarily leaving my position, and you can see what all 10 of these are. Now, again, I think it's important to point out that 1, 2, 4, 5. I'm just looking at the ones 8. A lot of different ones of these impact home time. And I know that I'm kind of preaching that home time thing right now, but it's because drivers are saying that's one of the main reasons I'm looking for a job. And carriers are saying that's one of the main reasons that folks are leaving. And so I think it's important when you're looking at all of these individual quote unquote root cause issues that you're thinking about how that impacts home time. Okay. So that's really important. Communication and planner issues accounted for 70% of the top frustrations around operations in Q2. So, again, this impacts home time as well. But communication is key. Drivers definitely have an opinion on how you're planning their loads and how you're scheduling them. And so be sure that you're communicating that well. It really helps in retention. When it comes to compensation, overall compensation issues were down from Q1, but miles related compensation issues rose. So drivers are complaining about compensation still, but really it's related to inconsistent miles or no loads available. So again, communicating with your drivers, making sure they understand their compensation, all of that is super important. And then general maintenance issues reached the highest point that they've been in 3 years. Like I said, equipment is really kind of starting to, you know, become more and more of an issue as folks are holding on to their assets longer because of the investment that it takes to buy new trucks or even recycle them out, cycle them out. And so I think it's really important as a fleet to look at your equipment and how that's impacting retention and what is the risk or reward on when and if you decide to make new investment in trucks. Okay, last section is our driver data. So this came out of our spring driver survey. 50% of drivers said they have not received a pay raise in 2 years. So really, I think this just goes back to overall retention, something for you to be aware of, something for you to think about. What would my drivers say? As inflation has risen, maybe they haven't received a pay raise. Just something to think about and how you're communicating that and how you're looking at that. And especially if your miles have been down, then not only have they not received a raise, but they probably are getting paid less if miles are down. So lots of things to think about regarding that. This was interesting. This came out of our spring driver survey as well. Over 42% of drivers said that better benefits was one of the reasons they were looking for a new job. So benefits are starting to creep up more and more in some of this data that we're looking at. Fleet Intel is a great resource for that because it can tell you like how you stack up from a pay and benefit standpoint. If you're interested in that, talk to your account executive about that as well. And then this is like the Priscilla question of the century. I ask this question all the time. Are you recruiting your current drivers? Because they're telling us they are being recruited. So over 90% of drivers reported being contacted by other recruiters at least once a week. Some of them more than once a week. Many of them more than once a week. So my question is, are you recruiting your current drivers? And my follow-up to that is because someone is. I can guarantee you someone is. And so it's really important to think about what are you doing for your current drivers to really help with your turnover, which ultimately helps with your recruiting. And then we always kind of wrap up our data rundowns showing you what are the top review keywords for the previous quarter in driver review. So what are drivers talking about in driver review? So these are from the top 4 keywords from positive driver reviews and the top 4 keywords from negative driver reviews. Number 4 on positive, this is new to the list. We've never had environment. So I did some digging to see like, what does that mean? Because it's not the environment that you're probably thinking it might be. And it's not global warming that they're necessarily talking about positively. They're saying their work environment. So we had this show up as culture for a few quarters as well. So think of it from that standpoint, not from an environmental standpoint. Not that drivers aren't concerned about the environment, they are. But in this case, they're talking about their work environment. Also, when you look at the negative, stress comes up, management. When you see driver, that just means like, as a lot of times they'll use the word driver in their review, like I do not want to be a driver at this carrier, or maybe they're complaining about another driver. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the word driver could be used in a review, but those are different call outs for that. And then driver review ratings and the breakdown. I always tell people drivers are super polarizing. They either love you or they don't. And this is a perfect example. So 29% of the reviews were 5-star reviews in Q2. And these are from the reviews, all the hundreds of, or probably thousands of reviews that we review for our clients that are on our reputation management solution. 29% were 1%. And then you can kind of see where the other ones fail. So that's just kind of a breakdown on that. Okay. So that is a wrap up of our driver data rundown. Okay, so many takeaways from that quarter. Like, I feel like every time we do the data rundown, we're just like racing through all of the data because we don't want to take up, hours and hours on end, but there's a lot of good stuff there. So hopefully you guys can take some good things away from that, take it back to your teams and just be able to benchmark what you're doing, what others are doing, what the data's showing, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and you did a fantastic job. Maybe you should just do it all the time.
Oh,
just
no.
No. And here's what I would say to Priscilla's point. Obviously, we try to keep those under 30 minutes, like she said, but there's a lot of data in there, and there's a lot more in the data download that we don't go over on the webinar. Obviously, you'll be able to look in the show notes, and you can download the Q2 data download. There's a lot more information in there that we don't cover actually on the webinar. But there's tons of stuff on there. Again, we try to keep it under 30, but sometimes the data has other plans.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for listening. If you are enjoying the resource, help us spread the word with a rating and a review. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on an episode.
And as always, if you have any questions or topics that you would like for us to cover, reach out to us on social media, or you can drop us an email. Those details are waiting for you just below in the show notes. We'll catch you next time with more data, strategies, and a little fun to ace your recruiting and retention game. We will see you next time.